Welcome to the Commentary Podcast. Just a quick disclaimer, none of these opinions reflect the greater Phillipian board, but are our own opinions. Today we're discussing the international student experience at Andover. I have two wonderful guests joining me today. Start with name, introductions, pronouns, where you are from off campus, and one aspect of your home that you closely identify with. I can start. My name is Micheal. I use he, him pronouns. Off campus, I am from South Carolina, and one aspect of my home that I closely identify with, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, which is our capital, and we also are home to the flagship University of South Carolina college campus. And so when there are football games, Carolina versus Clemson, I'm a very, very staunch Carolina supporter, and that's something I carry with me everywhere I go.
I'm Guilherme Lima. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a senior. Off campus, I am from Salvador, Brazil. And an aspect that I closely relate with my home is I really like going to cafes. I mean, I go to Cafe Nero a lot, and they play a lot of bossa nova, which is a mixture of jazz and Brazilian traditional music, specifically samba. And it always makes me so happy that they're playing Brazilian music at Cafe Nero. But yeah, I feel like just music in general.
Yeah. My name is Kira Stepanova. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an upper, and I'm kind of from all over the place off campus. I'm originally from Moscow, Russia, but I live in Switzerland and Israel too, sometimes Portugal too. And I think one aspect I identify with in Russia is like, I don't know. I feel like I just like the snow. I'm really into winter sports. I love skiing. I love the white Christmas aesthetic. And, Andover's kind of liking that right now. But, hopefully when we get back, we'll have a bit of snow.
So, first question, what drew you to Andover as opposed to going to school in your home country? Because crossing international borders, that is a big jump for high school. So, if you could talk about what made you want to make that jump?
I mean, I can start. Well, I used to go to your regular Russian school in Moscow, so I didn't really have a lot of experience with American education prior to coming to Andover. But I think what drew me to America is, well, I think partially the myth of how great America is, because I think if you're like from the Eastern Hemisphere or from Eastern Europe specifically, all you hear about is how great America is and how many opportunities there are, which is like true, but at the same time, it is a bit far-fetched. So I think what originally drew me there is probably the myth of America, but at the same time, I do think like I always believed that American education was probably closer to what I want to get out of my high school and college experience. And just looking at Russia, I did not really identify with the politics, the like the people in there. I didn't always align with their views. So yeah, I think it was just a good decision. I think America, and specifically Andover, aligns more with my identity.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would say that I wanted to come here partially for the education, but also for the people I would be able to meet. Just because like living in Brazil, I live in a pretty like homogenous community of mostly just like middle to upper class white Brazilians. And I mean, I was always very in touch with Brazilian culture, and I still continued to maintain that part of my identity. But I was looking for a learning community that kind of reflected what I was looking for, similar to Kira, which was, diversity, not only like ethnic and racial, but also like diversity of thought and like intellectual diversity, people who wanted really to explore issues that people back home like mostly ignored, specifically at my school. And I feel like because of that, Andover has been a very fruitful experience and just like a really big departure from just the educational experience back home.
Yeah, no, this school definitely provided an amazing opportunity to meet so many different people from so many different places, both Americans and non-Americans, and I'm like infinitely grateful for that.
I know it's not the same for me being a domestic student, but I have to agree. I have noticed like there's just such a disparity between like my Andover life and community and my South Carolina life and community, and it can get homogenous in South Carolina, especially just like the area I'm from. And so it's nice to not even nice, but it's life changing to have an experience like Andover where we get to be exposed to all these different things.
I mean, there is really no other place like Andover. I mean, of course, there's similar enough institutions in the boarding school realm and in the college realm, but really like outside of this Andover bubble, nothing is quite like it. Like both like in educational terms and just like in the community that the school fosters. Like speaking internationally, it's even a more stark difference. But even like in the US, like from what I hear about like friends going to college from Brazil and from the US, like there really isn't any place like Andover.
Especially because high school are some of our most formative years. We come in as children and we leave as young adults. And so it's like, I agree with your point. I don't have firsthand experience of going to college and maybe a similar like institution that's as diverse, but I believe that it's like there is just something special about having this experience for high school. So our next question is, what do you believe is the best part about being an international student? Something that domestic, borders, and day students miss out on.
I guess I'll go. I would like to highlight just like to me the best part about being an international student is that I get to hold like these two different parts of myself that are so like wholly unique uh in a way that like my Brazilian self and my Andover self represent such different things to me and such like different parts of who I am, and to be able to hold both and like take pride in both. I feel like Andover is a place that gives me like the opportunity to like really embrace where I'm from and the fact that I am international. I mean, as I said earlier, like being Brazilian was the norm to me, and now like coming here just being international is not the norm, and that was kind of a shock, but also like to be able to like hold that part of myself and like make that a even more like defining aspect of my identity has been really nice and rewarding.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think the duality of your identity as like an international student but studying in American high school, it definitely gives you more perspective on especially some global international events that are happening all the time. Because well, obviously all countries and all places and all cultures have their own biases and like nobody's free from them. But I think once you combine like enough biases from different countries, you may like get one step closer to more objective truth. So I think being an international student really helps me analyze like both how I'm feeling about the world and like maybe how one should analyze what's happening. So yeah, I think it's just about combining your experiences, both international and American, just to I don't know, learn more about the world.
I love that point because I think I found it to be true. One of my best friends is is Israeli, and one of my other friends, he is Turkish and has friends in Palestine. And so when on October 7th, I know this is like such a like drastic jump, but like on October 7th, like I was seeing all these things in the news, and I was more inclined to do more research for myself because I had these personal connections, and I had these conversations with people that I really care about, and it just like I guess it helped me reach some sort of objective truth, like you were saying, which I think is like important.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, perspective is everything. I think it's really, I mean, it's amazing that like just because of the international community that is fostered here gives even like domestic students a better and more full perspective of like international issues such as Israel and Palestine. I feel like specifically that uh, because it has gained a lot of attention in the US. I do think there's like a lot that doesn't reach here. Like it's great that people are talking about Israel and Palestine, it's very important to talk about it right now, but like there's just like so much that remains unseen here. And I mean, there is truth to the fact that like it doesn't have to be seen here in the way of like, I know, like countries should have their own autonomy to be able to deal with their own issues. And at the same time, like I do think awareness is important. But I just remember like, so in Brazil in 2022, there was this like eerily similar event to January 6th in Brazil, where Bolsonaro supporters took over many government buildings in Brasilia. And like the feeling I got from back home was that like things were falling apart. People were like literally did not know what to do. And it was a mess. And here, no one talked about it. And it was like really weird to me. But at the same time, like, I feel like the fact that like there were people here talking about it, a few, not a lot, goes to show the fact that like Andover does foster so many like, I guess like spaces and opportunities and people who are willing to talk about these things, which is great.
Why do you think the school wasn't talking as much about it? Is it just because the conflict wasn't like as known in America?
I feel like in a way the world is so large that like it's impossible to talk about everything. And I do think like we have to content with the fact that like I don't know, like we don't need American intervention in every single political issue that's happening in the world. America would disagree, but also like I don't need America to be messing with Brazilian domestic policy. But at the same time, it does like bring a lot of like of comparisons and parallels between like far right, almost fascist political figures that are rising throughout the world, and that was like a very telling sign of that. There weren't that many people talking about it, but there were, which is nice. And I feel like it's just good that there are people talking about it, and at the same time, it's not like necessary to get like that American view of these topics.
Yeah.
Do you think that the school because I'm like I'm a lower, so I'm relatively new to like Andover. Like when Dr. Kington talked about like how I forget the specific policy, but it was like we're not going to comment on
like political issues
that
because
don't
our
affect
institution is not affected by it.
Well, didn't he say? I thought he said that don't affect students, which I was like, these do affect, like, because guess where they're going home to. But I was. Do you think that Andover making, I don't know, like statements on I don't know what form they would take, but do you think them the school doing that? Do you think that's an example of American intervention?
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like institutional statements are important, and I do think Andover does have a responsibility to comment because there are so many people here who are affected by it.
Yeah,
and there has been like an increase in both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in the U.S. since then, and I feel like Andover does need to put their voice there. But to me, I'm a lot more interested in what students have to say about it. I'm way more interested to hear what Muslim or Palestine students have to say about it, or what Israeli students have to say about it. So, I mean, yes and no to your question.
You know, I definitely agree with that. And I don't think I'm voicing a niche thought when I say that sometimes students do a better job discussing these issues than the school officials.
Totally.
Because, well, again, because of the policy that like prohibits the school to discuss like political issues that might be controversial in the world. Yeah, because of that, I know that a lot of students were discontent with how the school reacted to the Hamas and Israel conflict. But I do think that the letters that the students collaborated on and posted in the later weeks, I think those were very comprehensive and like they showed some deep thought. So again, one thing I love about not only like the international community in the school, but just like people in general, they're very aware of what's happening in the world and they're willing to collaborate with each other and probably provide more comprehensive views, like more so than the school itself.
To just go back to your question, I think there's a difference between discourse and discussion and constructive, like just like talking about it and being able to like really see the effects on like the people who are going through it because of the Hamas Israel conflict, and at the same time be able to like respect the autonomy and sovereignty of both Palestine and Israel. So I I tend to gravitate against the American notion of like making everything about themselves. So I guess I would say I think it's important for Americans to be thinking about the way that these events impact the people uh, in the Middle East, specifically in Israel and Palestine. But at the same time, the U.S. has a tendency to make it about themselves and like their role. But also, I mean, it is something that like, again, as I was talking earlier, it's an effect. It has like there are ramifications of that event in the U.S. that like have to be dealt with. So I mean, I think personally, I'd rather the U.S. be focusing on,
Their
Islamophobia
connection, yeah.
here and anti-Semitism here, and just talking about like the effects that the war has.
So the next question: do you think is the biggest disadvantage of being an international student?
Well, I think Guy briefly brushed upon that. I think it's just this sometimes you feel this disconnect with your home country, especially when something is like that is politically huge happening in your home country and like everybody's back at home talking about it. Like to me was the Russian-Ukrainian war. Like it was a big thing. And like I like personally I just needed to talk about it with somebody because I wanted to debrief, like I wanted to figure out what's happening. And I don't really think I had the opportunity to do it on campus because there's just not as many Russian or Ukrainian students. And yeah, I think there was this like notion of being disconnected from what's happening back at home. And sometimes it can be demoralizing, especially like when something huge as a war is happening. But I mean, we live in the era of technology, so you can always just call people back at home. So I think it's like, yeah, on campus, sometimes you might feel isolated, but at the same time, if you have strong connections with your home, it should not be an issue.
I think it's hard. I agree with you. I agree. It's like when you're here, there is, I was talking about like that, like duality of being able to hold both parts of your identity, your Andover and your international self. And I think it's more of like you bring that international self to Andover, but like you do become disconnected to what's happening back home. And it does hurt, like I think when I first came, I did feel like a little bit of guilt. Why am I choosing to come here over staying home? Like why am I leaving that behind? And nowadays I don't see it as much as leaving behind because I try to maintain, ties and connections back home. But there is a lingering sense of like disconnect and guilt that comes from being an international student.
Do you think that the academy, and that being the board, administration, teachers, faculty, just anyone really, provides sufficient resources and support for international students, specifically during orientation and throughout a student's journey throughout PA?
Well, the thing about the orientation is that it's like exclusively student run.
It's all us.
All us. The only thing we ask of school is like a room, a space to gather the people.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, administration does not take part in orientation. And sometimes, like a couple of times, they tried to push back on it, actually. At some point, we had a minor conflict with the administration because I think they wanted to make all the students, like all new students, no matter domestic or international, come to school on the same day. And we had a problem with that because we believe that like jet lag and just like immense cultural differences should be accounted for and just like make the international students come like a couple days earlier. So yeah, the administration, like they heard us and yeah, they did not enact the new policy, which is like, I'm grateful for. But at the same time, yeah, I don't think administration really thinks that much about international students because I think we are like, 15% of the student body. I just don't think that's enough to make the administration care about it.
I mean, I think there are pros and cons to it being student run. I like that it's student run because I know that we can do a better job in the way of like we know international students' needs, we know what we want, we know how to make that transition smoother, we know how to create a space that will be inviting and for international students. And at the same time, there are resources that we just as students can't get to, and there are things we can't do, and it's like that like balance of like I love that it's student run. I don't believe in the school administration to run NISO, New International Student Orientation, as well as we do. Uh, and at the same time, it does feel like a weight that we have to carry, and it is a burden. So there, it's it's both a good and a bad thing.
And to finish up, what is a piece of advice you'd offer a little international eighth grader or anyone really who's nervous about coming to Andover? What is something you think you would like to hear or know before coming?
Well, I think I would have just let them know that, international club is a big thing on this campus. We have a lot of members, and I think our international community is very like intricately interconnected, and we all cherish each other. So it really does not matter where you come from. In NISO, everybody's gonna make friends with people from around the world. So like I think our biggest job as an international club that we take very seriously is building a community. It's not like kind of like a support web where each and every person has an opportunity to connect with everybody else. So I think especially when you're an international student coming from across the world, leaving all of your friends and your family behind, maybe with like time differences that like kind of halts your connection with them, I think this notion of international community is a huge thing.
My advice, I mean, that was what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
But I would say embrace the differences. Embrace the culture shock. Like, don't be scared of like losing out on one or the other side of your identity as an international student. Like, be like, understand that like you can come here and still be able to preserve and maintain that piece of you that makes you unique inside this community, uh and just like be able to embrace and live in both of those worlds. You are not going to lose out. It might feel like that sometimes, especially during the hardships, the occasional homesickness, but like being international is not something that leaves you.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I think it's just embracing this mindset of like belonging to everywhere because I feel like when you're moving to the US, it kind of feels like you no longer have a home because you don't live in your home country, but here you're a foreigner on like I-20 or other documentation. So, but I think yeah, like Guy said, it's really important to embrace both parts of your identity. And I think that's the true strength of international students, that we can belong to many places all at once. And I think it enriches like our experience by a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Guy and Kira, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. That's a wrap on the Commentary Podcast.
Bye.
Bye bye.